Hi, it's Kevin Lebates here, and today I'm going to quote a load of numbers at you concerning the Chia blockchain. Now, I did mention it beforehand. The Chia blockchain is positioning itself as a replacement for Bitcoin and switches from proof of work, which involves lots of ASICs, or formerly graphics cards, churning away to perform billions upon billions of computations for disk space. So it's called proof of space rather than proof of work. Now, these numbers that I'm going to quote at you are something that I just spent 15 minutes on throwing together, which is probably about the time that a journalist would spend coming up with the same figures, so take them with a pinch of salt. I may be out by an order of magnitude here or there. And the other thing is, I guarantee at the end that there is one fact or thing that you're going to remember from the whole video, but what you're going to have to then remember is that I've actually pointed out to you that it's probably inaccurate or even wildly inaccurate. But anyway, I think it's an interesting exercise. So the Chia blockchain uses people locking up their disk space in order to function. And that's your skin in the game. That's the sunk costs in order to participate to get these coins, and it's probably therefore what imbues those coins with value. And I checked today, and as of today, the size of the network is 7 exabytes. Well, actually, technically it's just under 7 ebibytes, but people are more familiar with the multiples of 1,000 measurement for disk space rather than the more computer-friendly measuring things in powers of 2. So 7 exabytes. Well, what's an exabyte? 1 exabyte is 1 million terabytes. So that works out at about 700,000 drives if the average hard disk is about 10 terabytes. And I quickly looked up some figures, and apparently the energy consumption of a hard disk is approximately 5 watts. So if we work out what the power used during an entire year is, there are 8,760 hours in a year, and therefore with 5 watts per drive, 4 million watts in total for all the drives that are currently on the network. That works out at 35 million kilowatt hours per year. So the second thing we're going to have to do is work out what the cost of these drives is. Now, it could get very complicated if I try to work out exactly how much mining all the raw materials is. We're also not going to take into account the pollution that will arise from processing the drives when they finally die. We're just going to look at it with a very simple calculation given that, let's say, about $100 is spent per drive, and this is really low because at the moment drives are going through the roof cost-wise, precisely because they're all being snapped up by people running nodes on the Chia blockchain. But let's go with $100 per drive. That means $70 million has been spent on buying hard disk drives. We're talking about the magnetic spinning types here, not SSDs, and we'll go on to those in a moment. So if we say that effectively the cost of a drive can be converted to energy, and we do a rough relation between the cost of the drive and the cost of buying electricity, we get another 7 million kilowatt hours per year for the cost of the current network. Now, when you look at the rate at which the disk space is growing, it's about 0.3 exabytes per day that is being added. So that's 30,000 hard drives per day being added to the network. Now, have I done that calculation correctly? I don't know, you can go and check it yourself, but I think it's about that. That does give us a crazy figure that about $1 billion is going to be spent on hard drives this year for the Chia blockchain. And that's especially weird given that the market cap at the moment is 500 million US dollars. So those figures may be a bit suspect. Let's knock them down a bit and knock a unit off, or 0 off the number there. But it still works out, according to my calculations, that we're looking at about 250 million being spent on energy on the drives. So that gives us our first figure. It's about 77 million kilowatt hours per year that the Chia blockchain is consuming. Nowhere near the cost of Bitcoin, but then again the value of the Chia blockchain is nowhere near Bitcoin either. Maybe if it does start to catch up, those figures will change. Well, not maybe, definitely, because as the profit to be made by gaining 2 Chia coins every now and again goes up, then so does the amount of money that miners will pour into or not miners, they're called farmers in the Chia world, but it's the equivalent thing. They'll put more money into running this equipment. So we'll find more and more disk drives just sitting on people's shelves or in warehouses, storing these 100 gigabyte files that you need to create in order to participate. Now, that brings me on to the next thing. You have to farm plots. You need to create these 100 gigabyte files that you store on your hard disk drives. And to do that, you need to use solid state drives because you want to do it as quickly as possible. If you're using a 1 terabyte solid state drive, you can create about 120 plots in about 40 days, and at that point your solid state drive will die and you'll need to buy another one. Now, I ran some of the numbers on that. It's about 300,000 plots being created per day. That means that there is about 120,000 solid state drives that are working on creating plots, and of course that number will be going up too as more people start getting involved with the Chia blockchain. But it works out that it's actually about 3,000 kilowatt hours per year in energy because SSDs don't use as much power. However, you do need to calculate the cost of creating and destroying all those solid state drives, which cannot be a good thing. It works at about 1.2 to 2 million US dollars at the moment that is going to be wasted on destroying SSDs in order to keep the Chia blockchain growing. So a rough figure that I came up with was 100 million kilowatt hours per year that is currently being spent on the Chia blockchain. Now, the first figure that I found by searching for the energy consumption of a house was that it was about 5,000 kilowatt hours per year. So that means that at the moment the Chia blockchain is using about 20,000 houses worth of power. So that's kind of a medium-sized town. Not too bad when you compare it to Bitcoin, where they keep talking about how it's using the energy of Poland or the energy of the Czechoslovakia, and I guess one day we're going to see that it's using the energy of Brazil or America or China, although I guess that's still some way off. But remember that the size of the Chia blockchain is going up by about 5% a day at the moment. It's really growing quite rapidly. Now, first calculation I did was to compound that, but that didn't actually make much sense because that would mean that in 1 year's time the Chia blockchain would be using the equivalent power of 1 billion houses. So that's kind of if you average 7 people per house, that would mean that it's using the power of the entire planet, and I can't see Chia growing to the point that it's consuming the entire Earth's power output. So I decided compound didn't make sense. Maybe I should just add it linearly, and if you add it linearly, then 0.05 times 365 means it's going to go up about 20-fold. So that takes us from 20,000 houses to 400,000 houses. That's the energy consumption of about a town, or not a town, a city such as San Francisco. So there you go. According to my back of an envelope done in 15 minutes calculation, I come up with a great journalistic snappy line that this time next year the Chia blockchain is going to be using the power of San Francisco in order to handle about, what is it, 1,200 transactions a second, I think was quoted. Anyway, it's an 85th of Visa, and that brings in another thing. Transactions don't make sense here. I will record a video at some point about why looking at transactions per second, energy consumption doesn't make sense for Bitcoin either, in the same way that it doesn't make sense for gold. What's the energy consumption of gold per transaction? Well, you'll say, what is a transaction in gold? You can carry that over to Bitcoin or Chia. But anyway, well, I said at the beginning that I would leave you with a snappy quote, namely that this time next year Chia will be using the power of San Francisco just to maintain their blockchain. Totally wild guess, and I haven't double checked my figures, but that's precisely what you'll find the media doing, or rather they'll find some academic or some pundit who has done the equivalent of what I've done today, and then they'll go and quote him. So if my quote does turn up somewhere in the media, and who knows, maybe it will, you can go back and say, well, actually go and look at this video. This guy came up with that, said that you were going to use it, and said you weren't going to fact check it. Somebody else, feel free to fact check my numbers. I'm quite open to you saying, actually, it's 10 times that, or it's a tenth of that. I think it's highly likely, given the fact that I only spent 15 minutes on it. But there you go. I think that's the kind of process that is going on when you see these reports about energy consumption of cryptocurrency. And we haven't even started to tackle the issue that is, well, okay, maybe a lot of energy is being spent on these blockchains, but we haven't even asked, is it worth it? Some people will say no, it's not worth it. Other people will say yes, the idea of a decentralized currency that is not controlled by central banks or governments or by private banks is worth spending a lot on. Certainly when you compare it to, say, the spending on Christmas lights or Beanie Babies or plastic toys that turn up in chocolate eggs that last precisely 2 days before we throw them in the bin, or the packaging that all our food comes in. I mean, you can start picking hobgoblins that you're going to attack. It's really a difficult topic to tackle, and one of the things that disappoints me about this whole energy consumption of blockchains thing is that every article I read, regardless of whether it's supporting blockchain cryptocurrencies or whether it's attacking them, seems to kind of miss the point. So I've missed the point with this video too. That's today's video. I look forward to seeing what kind of comments you come up with, and I'll see you in the next video soon. Bye for now.